Welcome to the History in Focus channel. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss more videos like this one.
For decades, these cases were considered unsolvable. Ciphers that resisted half a century, disappearances without explanation, deaths that defied forensic science, lies that deceived the entire world, 15 mysteries that passed through FBI laboratories, international police investigations, and newspaper headlines around the planet. Until someone discovered the missing piece. Some took 51 years to be solved, others 74. Brace yourself. These resolutions will surprise you more than the mysteries themselves. Case number 1. The cipher that resisted 51 years. Between 1968 and 1969, the serial killer known as the Zodiac terrorized California and sent encrypted letters to the San Francisco Chronicle. The first was deciphered in days. The second, known as the 340 cipher, resisted for more than 5 decades. 340 characters that nobody could translate. Professional cryptographers tried. The FBI tried. Computers tried for years. Nothing worked. For 51 years, the 340 cipher remained one of the greatest challenges of modern cryptography. The Zodiac had created something that seemed completely unbreakable. Dozens of theories emerged over the decades. Some involved sophisticated polyalphabetic substitution techniques. Others suggested the cipher was merely random, created to confuse. But 3 amateurs on 3 different continents had an idea nobody had tested before with that intensity. In December of 2020, David Orenchak in the United States, Sam Blake in Australia, and Jarl van Eyck in Belgium deciphered the 340 cipher. They worked independently but in a coordinated fashion, testing thousands of combinations of encryption keys using open source software. The secret was in the way the Zodiac had scrambled the lines of the text before applying the substitution. It was a known technique, but rarely used in that specific manner in that context. The deciphered message began with the phrase, "I hope you have been enjoying trying to catch me." And it continued saying, "By the way, I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to heaven early." The message was merely the cold provocation of a killer who knew exactly how much he was frustrating the police and investigators across the country. The FBI officially confirmed the authenticity of the decryption in January of 2021. The work of the 3 amateurs proved something experts had ignored for decades. The cipher was not genius. It was laborious. The Zodiac was not a brilliant cryptographer. He was merely methodical and patient. 51 years of mystery solved by 3 people who never met in person. The 340 cipher was not unbreakable, but the identity of the killer remains without definitive resolution. Case number 2. The disappearance of the Stardust. On August 2nd, 1947, the Stardust airplane of British South American Airways disappeared in the Argentine Andes with 11 people on board. The last Morse code transmission was a word that made no sense in any known language: Stendek. The radio operator repeated this word 3 times before total silence. For 51 years, investigators speculated about the meaning of Stendek. Could it be a military acronym? An internal airline code nobody knew? A word in another language the operator tried to spell in a rush? The theories multiplied. Some went so far as to suggest it was an alien message or an emergency code unknown to civilian authorities. But nobody found traces of the plane. No wreckage, no bodies, no answers. The Andes had swallowed everything without leaving a trace. In January of 1998, Argentine climbers found pieces of metal emerging from the Tupungato Glacier at more than 16,400 feet of altitude. The ice had preserved fragments of the Stardust for more than 5 decades and was now melting with climate warming. Rescue teams recovered engines, parts of the fuselage, and debris scattered over hundreds of yards. The plane had collided with the mountain at high speed during a snowstorm. The investigation concluded that the pilot had committed a fatal navigation error. Strong winds had blown him off course and he descended too early, believing he had already completely crossed the Andes. He collided directly with the rocky slope. Everyone died on impact. An avalanche covered the wreckage immediately after the collision. The glacier did the rest. It froze, preserved, and decades later began expelling what it had swallowed in 1947. But Stendek remains without definitive explanation to this day. The most accepted theory suggests it was a transmission error or misunderstood abbreviation, but no hypothesis is proven. 51 years after finding the plane, we still do not know what the radio operator meant in the last seconds of his life. Case number 3. The floppy disk that brought down a serial killer. Dennis Rader killed 10 people in Wichita, Kansas, between 1974 and 1991. He signed the letters sent to police with 3 letters: BTK, bind, torture, kill. After 1991, he disappeared completely without leaving clues. 13 years without news. The police believed he was dead or imprisoned for another crime somewhere. But in 2004, Rader returned to provoking the authorities. He sent letters and objects belonging to victims to local Wichita newspapers. He wanted attention again. He missed the adrenaline of provoking the police. In February of 2005, he sent a direct question to the police asking if a floppy disk could be traced. The police lied. They responded in a public announcement, "No, floppy disks cannot be traced in any way." Rader believed them. He sent a 1.44 megabyte floppy disk with a message. It was the fatal error of an entire career built on control and extreme caution. The investigators opened the floppy disk and examined the metadata of the deleted files. They found the name Dennis and a reference to Christ Lutheran Church in Wichita. A quick search of church records was all it took. Dennis Rader was president of the parish council. The police already had DNA preserved from crime scenes. They collected a sample from one of Rader's daughters through an old medical exam filed at a local hospital. The DNA was a match. Dennis Rader was arrested on February 25, 2005, exactly 9 days after sending the floppy disk that condemned him. He confessed to all the crimes in disturbing detail. He described each murder with clinical precision without showing remorse or emotion. He is serving 10 consecutive life sentences without any possibility of parole. He will never leave prison. The man who spent decades terrorizing Wichita was brought down by a 1.44 megabyte floppy disk and the naivety of believing the police's word. Case number 4, the brother who recognized the handwriting. For 17 years, an unknown terrorist sent homemade bombs through the mail across the United States. Between 1978 and 1995, he killed 3 people and injured another 23, many with permanent mutilations. The FBI named him the Unabomber, University and Airline Bomber, because the first targets were universities and airlines. Nobody knew who he was, no useful witnesses, no fingerprints, no solid lead pointing to anyone. In 1995, the Unabomber made a bold proposal. If the Washington Post or the New York Times published his 35,000-word manifesto, he would stop sending bombs permanently. The FBI accepted. In September of 1995, the Washington Post published the complete text. It was a dense treatise against modern technology and industrial society. It argued that only a revolution would destroy the technological system. David Kaczynski read the published manifesto and was deeply disturbed. Some phrases sounded far too familiar. The style, the specific grammatical constructions, the philosophical obsessions with technology and freedom, everything reminded him of letters his brother Ted had written to the family years earlier. David did not want to believe it. He compared old texts with the published manifesto page by page. The similarities were undeniable and terrifying. After weeks of agony, he sought a lawyer and contacted the FBI. On April 3, 1996, federal agents arrested Theodore Kaczynski in an isolated cabin in the mountains of Montana, without electricity, without running water, without connection to the modern world. Inside the cabin, they found partially assembled bombs, diaries meticulously detailing each attack, and complete handwritten drafts of the manifesto. Kaczynski confessed to all the crimes without attempting to deny them. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He died in prison in June of 2023 at 81 years old. David Kaczynski's decision saved lives. FBI specialists believe Ted would have continued sending bombs indefinitely. He himself stated this in later interrogations. The FBI paid the $1 million reward to David, who donated all the money to the families of the victims. 17 years of terror ended because a brother recognized the unique writing style of the other. Ted Kaczynski was brilliant, but he never imagined that his own family would turn him into the police. Case number 5, the UFO spy of the Cold War. In July of 1947, rancher William Brazel found strange metallic debris scattered across his property near Roswell, New Mexico. The material was light but impossible to crush or burn. He called the local sheriff, who called the military air base. On July 8th, Lieutenant Walter Haut, the base's public affairs officer, released a shocking official statement. The Air Force had recovered a flying disc. The news exploded across national newspapers. The following day, General Roger Ramey called an emergency press conference and presented debris from an ordinary weather balloon. He said the previous statement had been a grotesque error. Inexperienced soldiers confused the materials with something extraordinary. Journalists photographed the pieces of rubber and aluminum. The case was officially filed away. But the contradiction between the two official statements in less than 24 hours fueled deep distrust. For 50 years, Roswell became the worldwide synonym for alien conspiracy. Books claimed that extraterrestrial bodies had been recovered and hidden at Area 51. Witnesses declared having seen secret autopsies of non-human beings. The town of Roswell built museums, festivals, and entire tourist attractions around the case. Ufologists accused the government of covering up the truth. And in fact, there was a massive cover-up. But it was not about extraterrestrials. It was about espionage against the Soviet Union. In 1997, the Air Force declassified documents from Project Mogul. a top-secret program of high-altitude balloons created specifically to detect Soviet nuclear tests thousands of miles away. The balloons carried extremely sensitive acoustic sensors and were made of materials unusual for the time: metallic foils, lightweight balsa wood structures, adhesive tapes with strange geometric symbols, all designed to float silently in the stratosphere, capturing sound waves from nuclear explosions around the globe. The debris found by Brazel corresponded exactly to the specific materials of Project Mogul. The weather balloon shown at the press conference was real. It just was not the balloon that had fallen in Roswell that day. The Air Force deliberately swapped the debris to protect secret military technology during the height of the Cold War. There were no aliens. There were no interplanetary ships. There was a top-secret project that needed to remain completely hidden from the population. Case number 6. On the night of July 1st, 1951, Mary Reeser, 67 years old, was last seen in her apartment in St. Petersburg, Florida. She was sitting in her armchair, smoking, in a nightgown. She had taken 2 Seconal tablets to sleep. The following morning, the landlady knocked on the door to deliver a telegram. The doorknob was too hot to touch. Firefighters broke down the door. They found Mary reduced to ashes. All that remained was the left foot with the shoe intact. The apartment showed disturbing and contradictory damage. From the walls up, everything was covered in oily soot. Ceiling completely blackened. Light switches melted. The partition between the living room and kitchen was severely burned. Firefighters still found flames on a wooden beam when they arrived, but below about 4 feet from the floor, almost nothing had burned. Bed sheets a few yards away were white and clean. Newspapers on the heater, untouched. How does someone burn completely without setting the surrounding environment on fire? The answer came from subsequent forensic experiments conducted at universities. The human body is 60% water, but body fat burns like candle wax when exposed to fire. The phenomenon is called the wick effect. Clothing functions as a wick. Fat is constant fuel. Mary Reeser was sedated and smoking a cigarette when she fell asleep in the chair. The cigarette ignited the synthetic fabric robe. She did not wake up. The fire burned slowly, consuming body fat for hours, generating intense and localized heat without spreading through the environment. The wick effect was replicated in a laboratory with pig carcasses wrapped in fabric. The result was identical to the Reeser case: complete burning of the body with minimal damage to the surroundings. The skull shrinks when exposed to extreme temperatures for prolonged periods. Mary's foot survived because it was farther from the center of heat, protected by the position of the legs. There was no spontaneous combustion. There was a lit cigarette, sedatives in the body, and hours of slow, controlled burning. Case number 7. The retirees who fooled the world. For 13 years, perfect geometric circles appeared mysteriously in wheat fields in England. It started in 1978 in the Cheesefoot Head region near Winchester. Then it spread to Wiltshire near Stonehenge. The patterns were increasingly complex: spirals, fractals, geometric shapes that seemed mathematically precise and impossible to replicate. They appeared overnight, without witnesses, without visible footprints, without scientific explanation. Ufologists claimed they were alien messages left for humanity to decipher. Researchers suggested atmospheric plasma vortices as a scientific explanation. Scientists tried to find electromagnetic anomalies at the affected sites. Tourists visited the circles by the thousands, paying farmers to enter the fields. Books were published analyzing the patterns in detail. Documentaries speculated about extraterrestrial intelligences trying to communicate. England became the world capital of the phenomenon. In September of 1991, retirees Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley publicly confessed to the tabloid Today. They had created the circles since 1978 using wooden planks, ropes, and twine bought at a hardware store. The technique was simple. They fixed a rope to the center, stepped on the wheat in circular motion using the planks to flatten without breaking the stalks. They did everything at night and took about an hour per basic circle. No sophisticated equipment, no alien technology. Just 2 middle-aged men with free time and a sense of humor. To prove it, Bauer and Chorley took reporters to a field and created a complex circle live in less than an hour. They filmed the entire process from beginning to end. Experts who had analyzed previous circles could not differentiate the newly created circle from older ones considered authentic. The characteristics were absolutely identical. Doug Bauer got the original idea in 1978 after reading about the Tully saucer nest mystery in Australia, a case of circles and crops attributed to UFOs in the 1960s. Bauer and Chorley confessed to having created more than 200 circles over 13 uninterrupted years. They started as a joke between friends. They continued because nobody caught them and the situation kept getting more absurd. They watched researchers analyze their handiwork. Scientists measure non-existent anomalies. Ufologists declare imminent alien contact. With each more absurd theory that appeared, the more motivated they became. It was the greatest prank in the history of ufology, and it worked perfectly for more than a decade. After the public confession, other artists took over, creating increasingly complex circles using refined techniques. It became a competitive art form. Groups compete annually to make the most elaborate and beautiful patterns. But between 1978 and 1991, Doug Bauer and Dave Chorley fooled the entire world with wooden planks, ropes, and beer. Case number 8, the man without a name who had a name. On December 1st, 1948, a man was found dead on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. He was formally dressed, a well-tailored suit, tie, polished shoes. There was no identification. All clothing labels had been removed. In his pocket, a torn piece of paper with 2 words in Persian, Tamam Shud, it is finished. It was the last phrase of a book of poetry by Omar Khayyam. The autopsy found no clear cause of death, no known poison in the toxicology tests, no external or internal injuries. The stomach contained partially digested food, but nothing suspicious. The body was in a strange condition: rigid muscles, enlarged spleen, congested liver, signs of poisoning by a substance unidentifiable by the examinations of the time. The book from which the paper was torn appeared weeks later. Someone left it anonymously on the back seat of an unlocked car near the police station. On the inside cover of the book, there was a handwritten code, a sequence of capital letters that nobody ever deciphered, despite decades of attempts. And there was also a phone number that led to a nurse named Jessica Thompson. She denied knowing the man when questioned. She lied. Investigators discovered this decades later, but she never revealed who he really was. She took the secret to the grave when she died in 2007. In July of 2022, investigators extracted DNA from strands of hair preserved in a death mask made in 1948 by scholars. Genetic genealogy technology allowed them to trace complete family trees and cross-reference living descendants. After months of meticulous work, they arrived at a name: Carl Charles Webb, an electrical engineer born in Melbourne in 1905. He abandoned his wife in 1947 and disappeared without a trace. He died a year later in Adelaide, alone on a beach without documents or identity. He was not a Soviet spy as speculated for decades. He was not a British secret agent. He was a man who left his life behind and died anonymously on an Australian beach. The code was never deciphered. It was probably a personal notation without real meaning or a private memory system. The Tamam Shud may have been just poetic irony or a wish to end something painful. 74 years later, the Somerton man finally has a name. Case number 9, the Mad Bomber. For 16 years, between 1940 and 1956, a terrorist planted 33 homemade bombs in New York. He hit subway stations, bus terminals, crowded movie theaters, and public libraries. He signed the letters sent to newspapers as FP, sent to the Mad Bomber. The police had no solid leads. No useful witness identified any suspect. No fingerprints on the bombs. He was completely invisible and terrorized the city. In 1956, the psychiatrist James Brussel was called to help the investigation. He analyzed the letters, the pattern of attacks, the chosen locations, the language used. He created a detailed psychological profile: single man, Slavic, Catholic, paranoid, between 40 and 50 years old, living with a close female relative. Brussel went further. He stated that when arrested, the man would be wearing a 2-button suit, fully buttoned. The police thought it was too ridiculous, but they followed other leads from the profile that made sense. The letters mentioned injustice committed by Consolidated Edison, the energy company. Investigators searched through files of disgruntled former employees. They found George Metesky, a former employee dismissed after a workplace accident in 1931 that left him incapacitated. He lived in Connecticut with 2 unmarried sisters, a devout Catholic, of Polish descent, 53 years old. When they knocked on his door in January of 1957, Metesky answered in a bathrobe. He politely excused himself and returned minutes later, wearing a 2-button suit, buttoned all the way to the last button. Metesky confessed to all the attacks without hesitation. He was found mentally incapable of standing trial and committed to a maximum security psychiatric hospital until 1973, when he was released. He died in 1994 at 90 years old. James Brussel's profile inaugurated what is today called criminal profiling, a technique officially adopted by the FBI in the 1970s and used in investigations to this day. 16 years of bombs in New York ended because a psychiatrist predicted the buttoned suit. And he was absolutely right. The precision of the profile changed criminal investigation forever. Brussel did not use magic. He used psychology, statistics, and observation of behavioral patterns. Metesky was predictable for someone who knew what to look for. The buttoned suit was not luck. It was analysis of obsessive-compulsive personality. Brussel created a mental map of a man he had never seen. And when the door opened, there he was, exactly as predicted. Case number 10, the discarded tissue that closed 44 years of impunity. For more than a decade, California lived under the terror of an invisible predator. He broke into homes at night, tied victims with ropes, raped women in front of their bound and gagged husbands. Between 1974 and 1986, he committed at least 50 documented rapes, 120 home invasions, and 13 brutal murders. He had 3 different code names before they discovered it was the same person. Investigators collected DNA at several crime scenes in the 1980s and 1990s. They knew they were looking for a single man responsible for all the crimes. But there was no match in any American criminal database. Decades passed without progress. Victims died waiting for justice that never came. Until, in 2017, retired investigator Paul Holes had an idea nobody had tested before in that context: submit the killer's DNA to a free public genealogical database open to anyone. In April of 2018, Holes uploaded the killer's genetic profile to GED Match, a free website where people submit DNA to find distant relatives and build family trees. The system found matches with third cousins. Genetic genealogist Barbara Ray Venter built meticulous family trees starting from those distant cousins. She cross-referenced births, marriages, deaths, and migrations. The trees converged at a single point. Joseph James D'Angelo, a 72-year-old former police officer living quietly in Citrus Heights, California. Surveillance teams followed D'Angelo discreetly for days. They waited for him to discard something with recoverable DNA. On April 19, 2018, D'Angelo threw a used tissue into the trash after getting out of his car in a public parking lot. The investigators recovered the tissue immediately. They sent it for urgent genetic analysis. The DNA was a perfect match with the crime scenes from decades earlier. On April 24, 2018, Joseph James D'Angelo was arrested, 44 years after the first documented attack. D'Angelo confessed to 13 murders and 50 rapes in a deal with prosecutors to avoid the death penalty. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in August of 2020. During the sentencing hearing, survivors read impact statements for hours. Some victims had waited more than 40 years for this moment. Many did not live to see it. After hearing the victims' statements, D'Angelo told the court, "I heard all of your statements, each one of them, and I am truly sorry for everyone that I hurt." Case number 11. The monster that was a toy submarine. On April 21, 1934, the Daily Mail published the most famous photograph of a mythological creature in history. It showed a long, sinuous neck emerging from the dark waters of Loch Ness in Scotland. The image was attributed to Robert Kenneth Wilson, a respected London gynecologist. For 60 years, it was considered the best photographic evidence of the existence of Nessie. Ufologists, cryptozoologists, and tourists from around the world believed wholeheartedly. Wilson always refused to give details about how he took the photo. He said only that he was on vacation in the region and saw something strange emerging from the water. He did not want to associate his professional name with the case publicly. The photo became known as the surgeon's photo. Technical analyses were conducted over the decades. None detected obvious manipulation in the negatives. The image appeared completely legitimate. In 1994, Christian Sperling was dying of cancer. At 93 years old, he decided to tell the complete truth. He had sculpted the fake neck using ordinary modeling clay, fixed to a simple wooden structure. The base was a wind-up toy submarine bought at a department store in London. The neck was about 12 inches tall. Sperling built everything at the request of his stepfather, Marmaduke Wetherell, who wanted to publicly get revenge on the Daily Mail. Wetherell had been hired by the Daily Mail to hunt Nessie in 1933. He found footprints that were later revealed as fake, made with a stuffed hippopotamus foot used as a stamp. The Daily Mail publicly ridiculed him in the pages of its own newspaper. Furious, Wetherell created the elaborate hoax. He asked Sperling to build the model. He asked the Dr. Robert Wilson to take the photos and deliver them to the newspaper. A respected physician gave immediate credibility. Wilson agreed. Nobody ever suspected for 60 years. The toy submarine sank shortly after the photos were taken. The modeling clay soaked through quickly and the weight unbalanced the structure. It is at the bottom of Loch Ness to this day, probably destroyed. Sperling's confession in 1994 closed 60 years of mystery. It was not a prehistoric monster. It was not a plesiosaur surviving from the age of dinosaurs. It was a personal vendetta. The most famous photo of Nessie was a hoax assembled in half an hour. The tourism industry of Loch Ness did not care. It continues making millions from the legend to this day. The confession changed little. People want to believe. The surgeon's photo still appears in books, documentaries, and souvenirs. The truth is boring. A toy submarine does not sell t-shirts, so the legend survives, even dead. 60 years of deception, and it worked better than Wetherell ever imagined. Case number 12. The plaster giant that fooled crowds. On October 16, 1869, 2 workers were digging a well on William Newell's farm in Cardiff, New York. At about 10 feet deep, the shovel struck something too solid to be stone. They dug around carefully. It was a petrified human body 10 feet tall and weighing about 3,000 pounds. It seemed to be thousands of years old. Newell charged 50 cents per person to see the giant. Crowds formed lines stretching for miles that lasted hours. Scientists examined the body up close. Some declared it an authentic prehistoric human fossil. Others said it was an ancient statue from a lost civilization. Religious fundamentalists claimed it was literal proof of the giants mentioned in the Bible in Genesis. P.T. Barnum, the famous circus entrepreneur, offered $60,000 for the giant, an enormous fortune at the time. Newell refused. Barnum had a plaster copy, sculpted and publicly exhibited it as the original. Two fake giants competing for the audience. It became a lawsuit. The truth came to light months later. The giant was a plaster sculpture commissioned by George Hull, Newell's atheist cousin. Hull hated fundamentalist preachers who cited biblical giants as incontestable historical fact. He hired a sculptor in Chicago, used plaster mixed with marble dust to give an aged appearance, weathered the surface with sulfuric acid, and buried it on his cousin's farm an entire year before the planned discovery. Hull profited thousands of dollars before confessing to the hoax in 1870. Even after the public confession, people continued visiting the giant, now as a historical curiosity, not as a genuine fossil. The Cardiff giant is permanently on display at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York. Hull's hoax became a model for future archaeological pranks. It showed how mixing fake science, religion, and public curiosity generates quick profit. And even after the confession, people paid to see it. The truth no longer mattered. The spectacle mattered. George Hull understood this in 1869. The pseudoscience industry is grateful to this day. Case number 13. The bloop. In 1997, hydrophones from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the United States, captured a sound coming from the South Pacific, so loud that stations separated by more than 3,000 miles detected it simultaneously. The acoustic profile was ultra-low, seemed biological, but was louder than any known animal. Louder than the blue whale, the loudest living animal on the planet. The sound was nicknamed the bloop. It lasted about 1 full minute. The origin was triangulated to a remote region of the South Pacific, approximately 900 miles west of the coast of Chile. Cryptozoologists speculated about an unknown giant marine creature living in unexplored ocean depths. Some went so far as to suggest it was the biblical Leviathan, or a creature similar to the monster Cthulhu described by H.P. Lovecraft. The internet exploded with increasingly elaborate theories. For 15 years, the bloop remained without a definitive official explanation. NOAA knew internally that it was not an animal, but did not have definitive technical confirmation of the exact origin. In 2012, after analyzing additional acoustic patterns collected and cross-referencing polar monitoring satellite data, the agency confirmed the sound was an ice quake, a massive fracture of icebergs separating from the Antarctic ice shelf. Blocks of ice the size of entire cities, cracking and fragmenting under extreme pressure. Ice quakes generate ultra-low profile sounds that travel thousands of miles underwater through oceanic acoustic channels. Antarctica is approximately 3,000 miles from the point where the bloop was detected, a distance perfectly compatible with acoustic propagation in deep waters. The monster was the frozen continent breaking apart, releasing blocks of ice that fall into the ocean and generate sound waves detectable from the other side of the planet. Case number 14. The paper fairies that fooled Sherlock Holmes. In July of 1917, in Cottingley, a village in northern England, two cousins took photographs that would change their lives forever. Frances Griffiths was 9 years old. Elsie Wright was 16. The 5 photos showed the girls interacting with winged fairies in the back garden. Translucent wings, flowing garments, delicate expressions. They seemed too real to be the invention of ordinary children. The photos reached Edward Gardner, a prominent member of the Theosophical Society. Gardner showed them to Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes and a convinced spiritualist. Doyle was completely fascinated. He sent experts to analyze the original photographic plates with a magnifying glass. None found signs of manipulation or double exposure in the negatives. In 1920, Doyle published an extensive article in the Strand magazine declaring the Cottingley fairies authentic. His credibility as a famous author gave immense weight to the story. Doyle published an entire book defending the physical existence of fairies in 1922. The Cottingley photos were the central evidence of everything millions of people around the world believed. Frances and Elsie became instant celebrities. They were interviewed, photographed, questioned repeatedly. They maintained the story for decades without wavering. Even as adults, they never fully admitted to a hoax. Critics accused them, but without definitive proof. In 1983, the cousins, by then elderly, finally confessed to the Unexplained magazine. The fairies were cardboard cutouts from a children's book called Princess Mary's Gift Book. Elsie copied the illustrations, cut out the figures with scissors, fixed them with hairpins to the bushes, and took the photos. Frances posed beside them. All done in one July afternoon of 1917. 2 girls playing. They never imagined adults would believe them. When they did, it was too late to go back. Arthur Conan Doyle died in 1930, believing in the Cottingley fairies. He never knew he had been fooled by two children with scissors and hairpins. The original photos are archived at the National Science and Media Museum in Bradford, England. Case number 15. The Bigfoot. That was a man in a costume. On October 20th, 1967, Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin were riding horses through Bluff Creek in Northern California, looking for evidence of Bigfoot. Patterson carried a 16mm camera. At 1:30 in the afternoon, they spotted a hairy bipedal creature crossing a clearing about 130 feet away. Patterson jumped off his horse, grabbed the camera, and filmed 59 seconds before the creature disappeared into the dense forest. The film showed a creature approximately 6.5 feet tall, covered in dark hair, walking upright on two legs with fluid movements. At one point, the creature looks directly at the camera before continuing to walk. The footage became the most famous visual evidence of Bigfoot in history. It was analyzed by primatologists, anthropologists, and special effects specialists. Some declared it authentic. Others said it was obviously a man in a costume. The debate lasted decades without definitive conclusion. For decades, the cryptozoological community defended the authenticity of the Patterson-Gimlin film tooth and nail. Patterson died in 1972 of cancer, maintaining that the footage was genuine until the end. Gimlin upheld the same version until the 2000s. Nobody could definitively prove fraud. But in 2004, Bob Hieronymus, a farmer from Yakima in the state of Washington, publicly confessed. He was inside the Bigfoot costume that day. Patterson paid him $1,000 to wear a customized gorilla skin suit and walk through the clearing while being filmed. Hieronymus provided details that only someone present would know: the suffocating heat inside the costume, the smell of burned rubber, the difficulty of seeing through the eye holes. A documentary released at the SXSW Festival in March of 2026 included new evidence corroborating the confession. Defenders still contest it. They say Hieronymus lied for money or attention, but the balance has tipped. 59 seconds of footage that fueled 5 decades of debate probably show Bob Hieronymus sweating inside a gorilla suit in October of 1967.